All right, I think we're gonna get started. Wait. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by recognizing and acknowledging the Lekwungen people, the Songhees of the Esquimalt Nation, whose traditional territory we live, we learn, and we do our work, and we're gathered on this evening. I want to just do some introductions around the table, and Carolyn, if we could start with you.
Sure, I'm Carolyn Howe, she, her, the president of the Greater Victoria Teachers Association.
I'm Jane Massey, Vice President of QP 9%.
Anna Big Sister, Songhees Nation Student Success Manager. Vicki Roberts, I am the Vice President of the Victoria Principals Vice Principals Association and Principal at Blandford.
Great. I'm Sherry Bell. I'm official trustee of the Greater Victoria School District.
I'm Deb Whitten, superintendent in the Victoria School District.
Katrina Stride, Secretary Treasurer.
Norman Isaac, President of QP32.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome everybody that's here and those of you that are tuning in from at home. I want to just pass the motion that the agenda is approved. And I've just got a few opening remarks before we get going in this special budget meeting. So this has been, I think, a very difficult month for a lot of people. And I just want to thank the people that are around this table, in the audience and at home that participated in our budget process. This year was not easy and quite emotional for some. I want to talk about the process first and then go into just a few other comments before our Secretary Treasurer presents the budget. The process itself, I feel like we started looking at the budget in September. Certainly at our partners of ST61 meetings, we've talked about budget for months. And just so everyone is aware, partners of ST61 include representation from Songhees Nation, Esquimalt Nation, Urban First Nations, our 3 unions, our DC PAC, and principals, vice principals, along with leadership. So all of those people were involved in our partners of ST61 meetings. And we together created the process for budget. I didn't do this by myself. I had a lot of work and collaboration with partners. So with that, one of the first things that we did was made a change where we presented the budget a little bit earlier before we had only preliminary numbers to go with. So that was before the ministry gave us our per pupil funding. And that was a request from some of the partners, let's get it out early, and so we did. And with that, we had conversations about potential places where we could reduce if we had to, hoping, of course, that we wouldn't have to. And our per pupil came in after that initial meeting, so middle of, just before spring break, middle of March, and then we knew that there were no changes, and so we went out with the same information after that. I've received well over 600 letters from members of the public, parents, students, partners. Like, it's been quite something to see how engaged people were, particularly around reductions to middle school music. There were other comments as well. Then we had our roundtable discussion, which was an opportunity for the district to share the budget numbers, where we were at, the kinds of things that Katrina will be probably talking a little bit about tonight, and receive feedback from students, from the community at that meeting. There was a lot of feedback. And again, I read every single piece of feedback and looked at the comments that students made, that parents made. And, you know, it was heartbreaking to think that in this day and age, we have to reduce more, because this district has been reduced over and over again. So after that, there was an opportunity for online feedback. And from the online feedback, we got 236 individuals that put comments in. And this time they really ranged from middle school music, but they did range and covered almost all of the areas that we're looking at reducing: pathways and partnerships, lots of information about the impact that will have on schools, on students. We had people talk, throughout this process, and this is kind of human nature, there's a lot of misinformation too. And that's hard to deal with, especially on an anonymous online survey. But some of the misinformation was like, well, why don't you cut athletics? Well, we only contribute 140,000 to athletics. Why don't you cut district administration? And as we go through the information tonight, you'll see the information that's there. And I know that everybody isn't gonna sit home or come to meetings and look at the presentation, but it's difficult to respond to information at times when it's anonymous. So there are also misinformation about counseling, and that we were reducing counseling. And there's actually someone on CBC radio yesterday talking about how the reduction in counseling is going to be detrimental, and we're not reducing counseling. There is a small reduction in youth and family counseling, and it's a youth and family counselor that is attached to a family of schools. So it's not school-based counseling, it's not teacher counseling. So there's been a lot of feedback, and I do want to thank people for doing that, and to say that, you know, it is important to provide feedback. And I have read everything, and many of the emails required a long response, and some I couldn't reply to because they were generated from a website. But the ones that we could respond to, we did. And it all has been taken to heart. And you'll see a few small changes in the budget presentation, a few small additions tonight that, you know, after listening to the feedback, I thought we had to do something. And we have shifted some things that you'll see later on. So $5.2 million is the structural deficit, and that's not going to get any smaller. And there's been cuts to every area over the years. And so what we're seeing this year is 1 year. And, you know, somebody asked the meeting, well, why don't you cut facilities? Well, over 4 years, it was cut $700,000. So there's a history here of reductions and mitigation, and making sure that what we do is in the best interest of students. And sadly, we have to reduce, and that is heartbreaking. Nobody wants to sit here and pass a budget that has reductions to students and then affect people in our community and employees. So those are the small changes that we were able to make, include taking $52,181 out of the privacy management program and the print strategy, and adding almost $20,000 back into one block for careers, and just over 18,000 to middle school music, and 4,147 to increase the SLP. So I want to just, before I close and pass it over to Katrina, just make mention of a few things. And one is middle school music. That was the topic that captured the community, the media, and people outside of Victoria. We receive letters from people outside of Victoria. So, we were talking about our middle school music program, and somebody said it was a gem. And it is a gem. It's an amazing program. And we have a few music teachers here tonight, and they do incredible work. So this isn't about that. It's, unfortunately, I think where we have to look is, I don't want people every year to think middle school music is on the chopping block again. That caused a lot of angst and a lot of response. And to have to go through that every year is just not right. So when we look at our amazing program, it's a very expensive program. It costs the district right now $1.2 million. The reduction that we originally had put out was a reduction of $250,000. And when I've been doing a lot of talking to other people in other districts and also looking at middle school music models. And we do have the best, the most expensive and the best model around right now. If we had $1.2 million, we don't. And that structural deficit isn't going away. But I don't want to see this being looked at every single year. So I think there has to be conversation that includes teachers and district staff to look at, are there other options so that this doesn't continually happen every single year? And I'm not talking about reducing we're putting in $1 million right now, but is there a way to look at things a little differently? When you look at other school districts, Coquitlam was the school district that we modeled our middle schools after. They do their band and strings in the morning before school starts. Suk and Saanich it doesn't cost $1.2 million. They use it as part of their exploratory. So there are other models out there, and I think it's a good conversation to at least have as to how do we stop the angst every year, and how do we still have an amazing middle school program for students in music. We have to have a sustainable model, and the only way you can do that is to bring people together to have conversations. So I've been talking to our superintendent about what could happen as far as creating that synergy to look at things without people being anxious that something's going to be reduced or eliminated. And finally, I just want to mention on that topic, 3 students from Mount Doug who are fundraising right now. They were at our meeting, on our roundtable meeting, and they listened to the budget presentation, and they felt that they wanted to support middle school music, and so they're fundraising right now. And they've attracted a lot of media attention, and any funds that they raise will go directly to middle school music for the 26-27 school year. So a huge applause to some students that have taken on a leadership role. So those are my comments, and I would like to pass it now over to our Secretary Treasurer. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I get started, I always just want to acknowledge the people who are behind this work, the documents that are here, and all of the numbers, and they're here with us tonight. And that's Harvinder Parmar, she's the Director of Finance, Budgets, and Financial Reporting, and also Julie Letner, the Associate Secretary Treasurer. We'll just get started. Not advancing. There we go. So we have values and guiding principles that are tied to the budget development process. I just want to highlight this one, and that is that our budget decisions are to align to the district's strategic plan, goals and strategies, as well as the focus areas of the Enhancing Student Learning Report. There you go. As Trustee Bell mentioned, the budget development process was done in collaboration with partners of SD 61. And just shows you a list of all of the different events and meetings that we had to get feedback from our partners, from students, families, and community members. And just an overview of the budget cycle. For school districts, our budget is approved twice. So we have our annual budget, which is based on our projected enrollment. And that is approved by the board following the funding announcement in March. And then the budget is approved again. It is the amended annual budget, and it's based on our actual enrollment, and it is approved following the ministry funding announcement in December. So we submitted our projections for 26-27 to the ministry in February and received the funding announcement from the ministry in March. So we are now in the process where our budget is approved by the official trustee, and the staffing packages will be prepared and sent out to schools this Friday. So the board approved budget is comprised of 3 separate funds. So we have operating, special purpose, and capital. And the focus of this presentation will be on the operating budget. That is the fund that needs to be balanced and where we make adjustments in order to balance. Just want to highlight that the board is required by legislation to approve a balanced operating budget. We are permitted to use unspent operating budget from prior years to balance the budget. For the 26-27 year, we are using confirmed surplus from 24-25 and also projected surplus from the year we're in now, 25-26. When we're using projected surplus, we have to be very conservative in the number that we use. It has to be reasonably certain, not speculative. And usually when we have one-time surplus that's available, it's based on one-time factors that occur. So for example, this year we had a very warm winter and we had savings in utilities. And these are things that may or may not repeat in future years. So going into the operating fund, looking specifically at operating revenue, this table shows revenue categories compared to the annual budget last year. And I'll just highlight the larger variances. So provincial grants, Ministry of Education and Childcare is down by 0.5 million. And the reason is our enrollment is down, and so our operating grant is also down. It is partially offset though by an increase in level 2 funding in inclusive education. And rentals and leases revenue is up by 0.5 million. And this is due to an increase in the fees that are charged to our out-of-school care service providers, and also the opening of new childcare spaces. This graph shows our operating revenue. 91% of the revenue is in provincial grants, and everything else is in 9%. So that's tuition, which is mostly international education tuition, rentals and leases, investment income, and other revenue. And when just looking specifically at the provincial grants, 76.7% is based on student enrollment. And the remaining 23.3% is generated based on student characteristics or district factors. for example, Indigenous education, inclusive education, or English language learning. And just to highlight that the only targeted funding that we receive from the ministry is for Indigenous education. This table shows our enrollment. The top section shows the breakdown of school-aged enrollment. There is a decline of school-age enrollment by 310 FTE. And lower down, it also includes detailed breakdown of funding for unique student needs. So all except for level 2 inclusive ed funding is either stable or declining. But level 2 inclusive education has increased by 112 students. And when we're looking at international student enrollment, we're projecting the same amount as this year, so 719. And that is specifically for their regular program. They also have students enrolled in short-term programs. As mentioned already, the funding levels per pupil funding levels did not change from 25-26. International education, I always want to highlight that international education, we take a percentage of their gross revenue and it gets allocated across the district. And so for 26-27, that amount is estimated at 6.5 million. And this table shows the operating expenses compared to the previous year. Just a note that this also includes the proposed reductions. So just highlighting the larger variances, total salaries has gone down by 1.4 million. Teachers specifically down by 2.5 million as a result of decreased enrollment. I will note that the bargained general wage increase has not been included in here, but once that we receive the ministry funding announcement for that, it will be added. So you'll see that come in the final budget. Principals, vice principals have gone down by 0.5 million. And other professionals up by 0.4 million. This is a result of a temporary reduction of a district principal and also the reallocation of 2 district principals into other professionals. Educational assistance has gone up by 0.4 million, and that's a result of that increased inclusive education enrollment. Support staff is down by 0.4 million, and these are reductions due to enrollment-driven positions and also department restructure. Substitutes are up by 0.8 million, and that's a result of an increase in paid sick leave, including the 5 Employment Standard Act paid sick leave days. Employee benefits overall are up by 0.2 million. Services and supplies total up by 0.5 million. Looking specifically at the services line is up by 0.7 million. That's a result of the addition of the trustee election, as well as inflationary increases for software and service contracts. And utilities are down by 0.3 million, mainly a result of the cancellation of the carbon tax that was announced in March 2025. So looking at our total operating expenses, 92.1% of them are associated with salaries and benefits. And everything else, like say toilet paper to technology, 7.9%. When looking specifically at the staffing costs, this just shows a breakdown by the various employee groups. Highlighting the top 3 teachers at 58.4%. And then educational assistants at 12.6%. And then support staff at 11.3%. Within the budget document, we also have our operating expenses broken down by function. So instruction, district administration, operations and maintenance, and transportation and housing. The biggest variances are instruction is down by 0.9 million as a result of our enrollment decline. And district admin is up by 0.4 million as a result of the trustee election costs. This is showing the percentage of the expenses in those various categories. Instruction is at 85.4%. That's everything related to the delivery of learning. District admin, 2.8%. Operations and maintenance at 11.2% and transportation 0.6%. So now moving into our current financial situation. We are in a position where we have a structural deficit. What that means is we have budgeted expenditures that are greater than our budgeted revenue. And we have a shortfall. And what we have done historically is we've been able to use prior year surplus or projected current year surplus, and sometimes one-time reductions in order to bridge that gap. This table is showing you that structural deficit is at 5.2 million. So these numbers don't have the balancing items included. We have 3.6 million of surplus that is already approved to be applied against that deficit, which left us with a $1.5 million shortfall that we needed to fund. And there's a lot of things that can create structural deficit. These are items that have impacted our school district. As mentioned, every time you have one-time reductions, the next year you have to add those back. We see a reduction in our revenue because of declining enrollment. We've had declining interest rates on our investments. Non-enrolling staffing levels greater than the collective agreement. An example of that is the 0.5 FTE counselors at all of our elementary schools, except for one. That's the choice that we made to staff in excess of that ratio in the collective agreement. There are programs offered, courses offered that are not funded by the ministry. Middle school music is an example of that. Unfunded inflationary costs, so software renewals, contracts that we have, service contracts where there are increases incorporated. Unfunded costs, so employee benefit increases, that could be premium increases, but also increases based on increased usage by our employees. Step increments. I use the teacher as an example. When they get their master's degree, they can move up a step, and that's not funded by the ministry. And then also our replacement costs for absences. So our average absences has increased, which we have to budget for those replacements. Unavoidable costs such as the trustee election that's coming up in October. And then also technology replacement. So we've set ratios for student devices and need to continuously refresh those devices to maintain that ratio. Oh, we had some questions come up about, well, what are we doing to reduce costs? And so I think it's important to share that we don't just wait until we have to prepare a budget to see where we can reduce costs. We are doing it continuously. Some of the efforts that we've made include, we participate in joint purchasing and cooperative procurement. So there are shared services organizations where we can join in on negotiated contracts that give us a lower cost. We will negotiate longer term contracts to get bigger discounts. We do audits of our contracts, expenditures, and our commodity taxes to see if we can find some cost savings. We've standardized equipment, and we've also strengthened our inventory management. Chromebooks is a great example of that. Extending the life of our assets. We use our Chromebooks for 7 years or have historically. There is a risk associated with using things for that long because they can break and if you haven't budgeted for their replacement. But we have extended the life as much as possible for all of those things. We invest in energy efficiency, so we've done a lot of replacements of our LED lighting and also are automating our HVAC systems so that they'll shut off when they're at night or on the weekends to try to conserve energy. There's been transition to digital and online workflows to reduce administrative overhead. Organization and staffing adjustments, including role consolidation, attrition-based reductions, as well as shared staffing. And administrative staffing reductions. And then the last item there is maximizing revenue from facility rentals and lease agreements. So I'll just go over some budget categories. So when we look at our expenditures, there are some buckets that we can put them into. The first one is the collective agreement obligation. So these are ones that we can't really do anything with. They're enrolling teachers. They're teachers that are in the classroom based on enrollment, based on class size and composition. We are also required to have non-enrolling teachers like counselors and librarians to a certain ratio. There's professional development and benefits. So those are examples of those kinds of items. And then we have a couple of pages here of items that we currently budget for that don't have a tie to the collective agreement. So there's no obligation similar to the previous page, and that is music. So middle music, we're budgeting 1.2 million. Elementary strings, 140,000. Instrument repairs at 50,000. Miscellaneous at 40,000. Athletics at 140,000. And then non-enrolling teachers exceeding the staffing ratios in collective agreements. That's counselors at 1.6 million. Early learning and childcare. So ECEs in kindergarten classes, 993,000. That includes a portion that is allocated from inclusive learning. There's Strong Start early childhood educators. We receive a special purpose grant for Strong Start, but we commit 42,000 in addition to that. Inclusive learning, so I mentioned level 1, 2, 3 funding that we received from the ministry. We supplement that, so over and above that funding by 12.2 million. Pathways and partnerships, we receive skilled trades BC funding, but we supplement that, so over and above the funding we receive 1.2 million. And then these items are they don't have a collective agreement obligation. They may have a commitment tied to a multi-year service contract or a set ratio. Departments is on the list. I have not listed all the departments or the numbers associated with them. Just highlighting that there is statutory compliance that's associated with some of the departments. So payroll, financial reporting, occupational health and safety, those kinds of items. So you couldn't eliminate an entire department, but you could make a reduction to a department. As was mentioned, we have done that in previous budgets. Facilities has had a significant amount. We've also done across the board reductions to supplies, for example, for all departments. Inclusive learning. So for speech language pathologists, psychologists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, orientation and mobility, all of those combined, 3.3 million. And then under mental health, we have youth and family counselors. So these are contractors at 1.7 million. Student transportation, we have busing that we provide for inclusive learning students. We also provide busing to students living in Beatisville who are outside of our set walk limits. And we provide crossing guard services at schools where we don't have full funding from the municipality. So those items combined are 1.4 million. And then lastly, technology, so network infrastructure, that would be like wireless access, Wi-Fi, student and staff devices, printers and tech packages, all of that combined is 1.9 million. And so then we'll move to go through the budget balancing considerations. So the first page are reductions one time. Network infrastructure, a reduction of 155,476. And this means that some projects will be delayed until 27-28. Staff devices, a reduction of 365,000. And some purchases will be delayed until 27-28. Information technology for learning department, reduction of 147,102. This is a temporary restructure of the department leadership due to the secondment of the director until April 2027. So the 1.0 FTE acting district principal position will be held vacant. Under reductions ongoing, we have pathways and partnerships, the aviation program, a reduction of 44,850. So this position we've been unable to fill for several years. And there are other career prep programs that remain available to students such as TASK and AutoTech. Pathways and partnerships career centers, a reduction of 259,946. For this one, each secondary school will receive one linear career center teaching block. Some schools currently have 2 to 3 blocks. And career center coordinators, which are QP positions, their hours will remain the same at all schools. The next line down is Pathways and Partnerships Career Centers. An addition of 19,996. And that's adding one secondary school, receiving one additional linear career center teaching block. So it's adding some back to the item that's above. More ongoing reductions, pathways and partnerships. A reduction of 139,831. This is a restructure in the department to a district vice principal and 1 teacher from a district vice principal and 2 teachers. Also pathways and partnerships, an $8,000 reduction. So this is, they've been able to support attendance at CES conference, will no longer be able to do that. However, their budget for program supplies and services will not be impacted. Middle school music, under reductions ongoing, reduction of 250,871. Middle schools will continue to offer concert band 6, 7, and 8, and strings 6, 7, and 8. Flexibility to use FTE for other ensembles, such as choir, jazz band, musical theater, etc. Elementary and secondary school music will remain as is. And then the next line there, middle school music, is an addition of 18,038. So it's being added to the line above, added to middle school music, additional flexibility to use FTE for other ensembles, choir, jazz band, musical theater, etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I could just take a couple minutes to talk about middle school music, because it has been so much of the feedback that we've received, and I think it's worth clarifying what we currently have and what will exist next year. And then, as trustee Bell said, looking at a future that we can create some sustainability and perhaps giving some examples. So I hope it's very clear that everyone understands that music is valued throughout the district. We've heard from students, we've heard from staff, we've heard from community, senior leadership, official trustee, all value and understand the importance of music. As we've heard, we do spend $1.2 million. That is additional funding to middle music. And next year we have allocated about $1 million to middle school music. To put this into perspective so that we, again, clarity I think is helpful. This is almost 10 times more than what we provide for K-12 athletics. And it is double what we provide for literacy. And so we are mindful with this. We clearly value it, but we also understand where money is going into our district. This year, middle school music, students can take about 5 different types of music offerings. So that might be concert band, strings, choir, jazz band, orchestra. Next year, with the $1 million that goes into middle schools, there'll be minimally an opportunity to take the concert band, to take strings, and then flexible funding to be able to offer the choir, orchestra, jazz band. So one example of a middle school in this district, in our district for next year, they will receive enough funding to offer 17 blocks a week in music. And so if that school chose to offer 6 blocks or 9 blocks of band, they could have 4 blocks for strings, and that would still leave them with 4 blocks in a week to offer choir, jazz, musical theater. This flexibility, so the staffing will come into the middle school, and the middle school principal, along with the music staff, will choose how they allocate that. And because every middle school is slightly different, and so we want to honor and recognize the voices in community, the students in the school, the staff in the school, to say we want to allocate this funding in these ways. They may have 3 blocks of band, or they may have 2 blocks of band. They may have combined strings classes if that works. Maybe it's in a beginner strings and a advanced strings. But those are the discussions that will happen at the school level. And we're happy to help with that, but it really is about clarifying what will be offered next year. Again, this is more, if you do the calculation of that number of blocks, that's more than the number of blocks a student in middle school would receive around language arts, science, or math. And we've heard a lot, and we want to be clear of what it will look like for next year. We've also heard again the impact to staff and to students and to families when they have this come up year after year through a budget process. And so as Trustee Bell said, we really wanna meet, and have a dialogue to be able to look at this in different ways. And I don't think there is a model that's going to be perfect for every school. But I think there are ways that we can be strategic and creative with how we can offer this, whether it's through exploratory, whether it's through a partial choice when students get into a grade 8, whatever it is, we don't have a set, it looks like this. I think it's the dialogue and the conversation that needs to happen. Again, as we move forward. So I know that there was concern around what will choir look like. If you're looking at this particular example that was provided, there still is an opportunity to have 4 blocks of choir in a week, which is about what is offered now. That would maybe 2 blocks of beginner choir and 2 blocks of advanced, or it's 4 blocks of choir. It really does depend on the school. So again, just really wanted to clarify. So it didn't, there was some misinformation out there, and I think it's important to share where this fits in our district, how it is valued, but how it will look next year, and how we get to a point where we can have conversations so that we are not putting this forward every year and having people really stressed about it and taking up a lot of time to make sure that their voices are heard. And we do appreciate hearing. I think we wanna clarify what this looks like in the future for next year. So, thank you.
Going back to ongoing reductions, we have itinerant support with a reduction of 69,916. That's a 0.20 FTE speech and language pathologist, 0.1 FTE psychologist, 0.2 FTE deaf and hard of hearing teacher. These are current vacancies or temporary positions that will not be filled. No layoffs will result. And the next line, also related to itinerant support, is an addition of 14,147. So this is adding 0.1 FTE back to the speech and language pathologist. Inclusive learning student transportation, there's a reduction of 165,921. There is a set criteria for inclusive learning students to be eligible to ride the bus. So only eligible riders receive busing. It will result in fewer runs. And the current cost per rider is 8,921. Also ongoing reductions, early childhood educators, a reduction of 159,660. This is 3.0 FTE ECs in kindergarten classes. They will be prioritized for consideration in the allocation of any contingency funds in inclusive learning. And just to note that ECs in the Strong Start centers will remain the same. Youth and Family Counselors, YFC, a reduction of 44,558. Note there that all elementary schools will have access to minimum 0.50 FTE teacher counselor, with the exception of Sundance Bank, who receive 0.20 due to their smaller size. Every school will continue to have access to YFCs. 14 prioritized schools have dedicated YFCs. And the contracted hours may be slightly reduced for some schools. One-time additions, we have the EA mentor, 29,533. So this is the second EA mentor position that was added. It's added again on a one-time basis in 26-27, extending for 1 more year. This is net of 36,000 that's already included in the budget. Student devices, an addition of 150,000. This is an increase in the purchase of Chromebooks to maintain the student device ratio of 4:1 at elementary and 3:1 at middle and secondary. One-time additions, we have privacy management program, an addition of 38,486. This was for a contractor to perform privacy impact assessments for district-wide software applications. This is a result of new legislation that requires these to be completed for any software collecting personal information. The next line below that shows that that item is being removed, so it will not be an addition. Managed print strategy, an addition of 52,960. This is an increase in the cost of print device replacement, so not increasing the number of printers, they will remain the same. And just below that, managed print strategy. So reducing that addition by 13,695. The replacement of print devices will need to be delayed until 27-28. We have an ongoing reallocation. So continuing education counselor, 0.20 FTE. This is a reduction there of 27,966. This is, there's low program enrollment for adults. SJ Burnside's current counseling allocation is able to support these adult students. The item below that is counseling elementary and middle school, an addition of 27,966. That 0.20 FTE counselor continuing education is being reallocated. So 0.1 at an elementary school and 0.1 at a middle school. And the last items on the list are the appropriation of the accumulated surplus. So 2,319,450 is allocated at the end of 2024-2025, already approved by the board in September 2025. And then projected unrestricted surplus, the end of the current year, $1,307,211, and the board approved that in February 2026. And moving on to the multi-year financial plan. So what the multi-year financial plan does is it takes the starting point of the balanced 26-27 annual budget. And then it looks to 2 more years beyond that. So all the future years have been adjusted for any of the one-time adjustments in 26-27. We have used provincial grant and international revenue based on projected enrollments for those years. But all of the other revenues, salaries, and benefits have been held constant, and we have not adjusted for any inflationary increases. So this is a summary of the plan that's in the agenda package. And it just highlights the FTE revenue and expenses. I'll just mention interfund transfers are actually the purchase of capital assets. So, and that includes all of the technology. So when you're looking at the column for 2027, 2028, that's a $4.8 million number. It's large because we've deferred a lot of purchases in last year and this year that are now being added back on top of what was already planned for that year. This doesn't tie us to this as a budget. We will go through a full budget development process, but I just really want to highlight, without any surplus from prior years, we're looking at a $6 million structural deficit for the next 2 years, so 27, 28, and 28, 29. And as mentioned, the budget bylaw incorporates special purpose fund. So this is a table that has the consolidated numbers for all of the special purpose funds. There's 20 of them that are in the ministry document in the agenda package. So special purpose funds get set up when we receive grants or other funds that are subject to either legislative or contractual restrictions. They have to be kept separate and they can't be used to balance the operating fund. And there were a couple of funds highlighted in the report. The National School Food Program was one of them, 0.4 million of revenue. That was federal money that we received through the province to complement our Feeding Futures food program. And then also school generated funds, so 0.4 million there. And it was to align to the spending in the current year. And lastly, the capital fund. So this table shows the revenue and expenses as well as all the transfers from other funds. So just highlighting transfers for tangible capital assets. From the operating fund, there's 2.3 million. It's for computer technology and infrastructure, photocopiers, classroom furniture, and facilities equipment. There's also a 0.2 million transfer from special purpose funds for computer technology, musical instruments, and furniture and equipment. And then just highlighting the local capital item there for 49,000. This is coming out of rental revenue from the Vic High artificial turf field. So allocating some of that revenue here to hold for future mat replacement. So when that field needs to be replaced, there'll be a fund here in the capital fund ready for that. And I'll also just mention that there are other larger capital projects for 26-27, including the completion of the work being done at Oaklands Elementary, some new childcare spaces, and then various other projects that are funded through our annual facility grant and also ministry capital funding. And then this slide shows you what the budget bylaw looks like. The total is 330,693,988, and it encompasses all three of the funds. And pass it back.
Great, thank you so much. Before I get to B4, which is the budget bylaw motions, and there are 4 of them, I'd like to just ask partners, if I'd like to give the partners around the table an opportunity to make a few comments if you have any. And also mention that if you have something written that you would like to be part of the April 20th board meeting as correspondence, please send it to Katrina. Are there partners that would like to make a comment? Okay, Jane, go ahead.
Yes, so I just want to say that Shauna Abbott, our president, sends her regrets tonight. She's bargaining in Vancouver on the K-12 team, so let's hope that they manage to get some good work on there, continue good work. So QP 947 is deeply concerned about the proposed elimination of ECE classroom positions as part of the current budget reductions, and there were 3 of them. These positions are not discretionary. They are an essential component of early learning and a critical layer of support for some of the most complex and vulnerable classrooms in School District 61. ECEs bring specialized training and child development that cannot be replicated or absorbed by other staff. They collaborate directly with classroom teachers to support students across all developmental domains: physical, emotional, social, and academic. Their work is foundational to early intervention, regulation, and creation of safe, stable learning environments. These positions also play a vital role in classrooms experience significant behavioral and safety challenges. ECEs provide consistency, de-escalation strategies, and developmental expertise that help prevent crises before they occur. Removing them will destabilize classrooms that are already stretched to their limit. If the positions are cut, we must ask, where will this support come from? Teachers cannot absorb this workload without compromising instruction. Educational assistants are already working beyond capacity. Administrators cannot fill the gap. And the students who rely on this support, particularly those with emerging or complex needs, will feel the impact immediately and profoundly. Budget decisions that reduce direct student support are not cost neutral. They create downstream pressures, increased behavioral escalations, higher safety risks, more disruptions to learning, and greater demands on already strained staff. Cutting ECE classroom positions undermines early learning, early intervention, and the district's stated commitment to inclusive education. We urge the board to consider this reduction and to prioritize the preservation of supports that directly affect student well-being, classroom stability, and the long-term educational outcomes. TP 947 stands ready to work collaboratively towards solutions that protect students and maintain the integrity of early learning in School District 61. And we do recognize that you said they will be prioritized, if possible. We also want to say it was, we had 3 vacant positions. And, that would have negated the cost or any layoffs, and those 3 positions were recently filled, which is gonna be detrimental to 3 people, 2 were external hires. And I noticed one of your positions, I can't remember, I should have written it down, they decided not to hire the vacancies and fill them, and we don't fail to understand why we did, especially 2 external positions that are, these people may not know they're gonna be impacted, they are. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Any other partners that would like to go ahead, Karen?
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to publicly state the concerns of Victoria teachers about the budget. It is too often that we've gone through this process, seeing cuts to service due to funding shortfalls, and every time I'm incredibly frustrated that the school district and board take the brunt of criticism that the province deserves. We know that our province invests the second lowest percentage of its gross provincial product to education in the country. And this chronic underfunding translates to austerity budgets and cuts to service. It's particularly galling that our district is going through this process at the same time that the province is increasing funding to private education. Funding that's risen from $491 million in 2022 to $600 million 4 years later. It's local private schools we know are expanding while our public schools are struggling, and it's a 2-tier system that is absolutely unacceptable. So that's one part of this, and I also want to acknowledge that we know, teachers know, no one in this room is happy with cuts to student service. We acknowledge that. We all know they represent harm to the students that we serve. And crucially, they tend to harm most harm children and youth who benefit and rely on specialized support and alternatives. And it's clear that you have made past investments in that area because you see the value. And now tragically, that investment provides room for cuts. We understand that process. I wanted to let you know that since the budget was made public a month ago, I've been hearing from really devastated teachers, but what I've been hearing is it's not their programs. It's not their personal, it's their programs. It's the kids they know who rely on those programs to find a home at school and to feel connected and supported and cared for. So 0.2 reduction in speech and language pathologists, that's 1 day less of service a week. It will harm the child who's waiting longer, who's already waiting and now waiting longer for help to access their basic human right to communicate. 0.1 cut to psychologist allocation represents, I've heard, 3 to 5 less assessments a year. And this harms children sitting in classrooms worried that they're stupid. And they're just waiting for that assessment so they can understand their learning disability and start to progress. 0.2 cut to deaf and hard of hearing is coming to a department that's already been identified as understaffed. And it means harm to those kids waiting to access the classroom around them. A 0.2 cut to the continuing education counselor harms teens and adults who've struggled in a traditional setting. And it really means losing connection to such a critical second chance that people in our society deserve. And it just might not exist anywhere else anymore. And then the 260,000, I guess it's less now, the 250 plus thousand cut to pathways and partnerships career programs. We know is cuts going to harm particularly the disadvantaged students who've been given a true pathway into a successful future through these programs. Programs that have provided deep connection and opened life-changing opportunities for students from families who may not have the ability to do the same. And of course, finally, middle school music. We've seen such community support in this area, and there's a reason for that. I think when middle schools were created, we placed music right in the heart of those programs. And we'll never know how many kids have been helped in their literacy development, helped in their feelings of school connectedness, helped to feel successful through that programming. And so kids, particularly, you know, we've seen them stepping up. They know that reductions to these programs are more than just restructuring. They represent diminishing, a diminishment to some of the most valued opportunities that they have to express and learn about themselves. And so kids in school, in public school, they deserve more than the bread of academic learning. They deserve exposure and access to the roses and create like a deeply enriched life. And that's what arts programming, music in this case, does. And you, Sherry, have been tasked with a horrible task of approving a budget. And I see you and your team have truly worked to minimize the harm it contains. We acknowledge and recognize that, but it still represents harms. And I think you're being asked to do the dirty work of the ministry, while they hide behind the talk of district autonomy. And each year we're in this position, each time things are shaved away bit by bit, we end up in a worse place than the year before, and we see there's more ahead. There's no change in sight. So what can you do about it? You know, I mean, you could have looked at a total radical restructuring, but I really don't think that's your place as an appointed trustee. You could take a stand and refuse to pass a budget that represents harm to the children you serve. And it would end your appointment a few months prematurely. And it would not mean that this budget doesn't get passed. It would be passed, we know that. But it would certainly shine a broad spotlight on the very real needs of the schools across this province. A principled stand like that would create ripples that would never be forgotten. I truly believe that. But I just want to speak last quickly to all of the community members who perhaps are going to watch this later on the YouTube link or watching now. And I want to call on them to take this forward. We have to hold the provincial government to account. We must make public education a vote winning and losing issue in every single election. In October, we need to elect new trustees who have a mandate for protecting public education and service to kids. It really is time for change in public education, and this will take organizing and work, but together the community can do that and make it happen. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Salome?
Yes, I'm going to take a couple minutes. There may be some repetition of what's already been said, but. Good evening, Trustee Bell, Superintendent Whitten, District staff partners, members of the committee. My name is Salome Kormalak, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Victoria Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils representing families across the school district 61. We want to begin by acknowledging the considerable work that has gone into developing this budget under constrained circumstances and by recognizing the concerns raised by education partners, including educators, support staff, and community organizations. These concerns reflect shared priorities around student safety, learning conditions, and equity. We also wish to acknowledge the students and parents who have shared feedback through letters, submissions, and consultations. Their input has been thoughtful, informed, and grounded in lived experience, and it must meaningfully inform both budget decisions and longer-term advocacy. We CPAC would like to express appreciation that the district has prioritized the students by ensuring there are no cuts to education assistants or school-based counselors. These roles are essential to inclusive education, student mental health, and safe learning environments. Families understand that the challenges facing ST61 are the result of long-standing structural funding pressures, increased classroom complexity, and rising costs that have not been fully addressed through provincial funding. What parents are finding increasingly difficult is being asked to choose between programs and supports that are all essential to students' well-being and educational success. These trade-offs reflect funding constraints, not community values. This budget is being considered at a time when many families are under significant strain with global conflict, climate-related emergencies, housing insecurity, and financial pressures affecting students' readiness to learn. In this context, schools must retain or remain stable, supportive environments, and investment in classrooms must remain the highest priority, particularly for mental health, inclusive education, and safe learning conditions. At the same time, we recognize fiscal realities and encourage ST61 to continue exploring opportunities to reduce costs and responsibly maximize revenue, including effective reviews of facilities and examining approaches used in other districts, such as integrating music into instructional time, as you mentioned, to protect high impact programs. Parents are increasingly concerned that these pressures are not unique to ST61, but reflect broader challenges in public education funding across the province. For this reason, district, families, and partners must speak collectively to the province. On March 12th, BCPAC passed a motion calling for provincial investment in education assistance, student mental health support, classroom learning conditions, and school-based childcare. Parents are not asking for enhancements. We're asking for stable, predictable funding that supports the basic conditions required for children to learn and thrive. With that, we just want to put a collective call to Minister Baer. We call on you to work with districts, educators, and families to deliver sustainable, needs-based education funding that reflects the real complexity of today's classrooms, because strengthening public education is fundamental to the well-being and future of British Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have? Well, thank you for your comments. I've been in education since 1981. So that's a long time. That's 45 years. I started as an elementary teacher, and I've done a lot of different things throughout my career in public education, both K-12 and post-secondary. And this is hard. This is hard work. This is it hurts my heart to do what we're going to do. But I need to say, I greatly appreciate people sitting around this table for your input, your counsel, your thoughtfulness, and your heart for kids, because that's why everybody is here. And there's no one in this room that wants to do something that's negatively going to impact a child. That is definitely not why 45 years ago I got into this, and I know everybody else sitting around here and watching your faces are in it for the love of educating students and being there for students, watching their growth. So this is tough. And I do appreciate you all being here and your comments. But I'm going to read the budget bylaw reading. So first of all, the motion is that the official trustee of the Board of Education of School District 61 Greater Victoria agree to all three readings of the Board of Education School District 61 26-27 annual bylaw at the special board meeting April 8th, 2026. And that motion is passed, and I have to read all three readings, so you're going to hear me say this 3 times. The bylaw is that the Board of Education of School District 61 Greater Victoria 2026-2027 annual budget bylaw in the amount of 330,693,988 be read first time on the 8th of April 2026. That motion is carried, and that the Board of Education of School District 61 Greater Victoria 2026-2027 annual budget bylaw in the amount of 330,693,988 be read second time on the 8th of April 2026, and that motion is carried. that the Board of Education School District 61, Greater Victoria 2026-2027 annual budget bylaw in the amount of 330,693,988 be read a third time, passed and adopted on the 8th day of April 2026, and that the Secretary Treasurer and the official trustee be authorized to sign, seal, and execute the bylaw on behalf of the board, and that is carried. And that concludes the special budget meeting. The Greater Victoria Teachers Association letter has been included in the package. The package that was put together by our Secretary Treasurer is available. The PowerPoint will also be available on the website for anyone that's interested in following the budget. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and for your love of what you do for our kids in the Greater Victoria School District. So that the motion to adjourn is passed. Thank you.